to see a flat piece of metal come to life and to shape something that was nothing, or to make a buck off of something and shape to it and then make that part fit it watertight and weld it together and then metal finish the welds and have no visible trace that I've been there. That's what I like to do. My name is Jeremy Minameyer, and I was born in Youngstown, Ohio. Well, just outside of Youngstown, Ohio. I spent the first 18 years of my life up there. I'm a metal shaper by trade. When I was a kid, all I wanted to do was old cars. Myself and my three brothers were all in the 4-H when we were kids, and we were in the welding wizards. I learned how to stick weld and MIG weld and use a plasma cutter and cut with a torch and bend tube and stuff. And I started doing that when I was like 6. My Uncle Joe, he was the king. Hair slicked back, sleeves rolled up, worked in a steel mill from the time he was a kid, owns every single car he ever bought in his entire life. He's got a 49 Merc that's beautiful, original paint, you're starting to see some of the gray primer come through on the fenders, original, beautiful car. His Merc, it broke something in my brain. It was something that I couldn't wrap my head around when I saw it for the first time. And growing up, I'm like, this is incredible. I want that. So, had this Mercury dream, right? But growing up, I couldn't afford a 49 Mercury, $10,000 at that time could have been $1 million, right? I couldn't buy a shell of a Mercury, but what I was good at is hustling. Buy, sell, trade, swap, buy, sell, trade, swap. I'd work on one and I'd have one that I drove, and the one that I was working on was kind of a chess piece, and I'd sell that and I'd buy another project, and I just kept building up until I got to something that had real trade value, right? And at that point in time, my good friend Jeffrey James had just got this T-bucket. So we ended up doing this trade, and I get this T-bucket, which was a beautiful car. It was purple, had a nail head, and a locked rear end and some cheater slicks, and it was one speed. It was always wide open. So I was on the ham, and I'm looking around the ham, and all of a sudden this 49 Merc pops up for sale in South Carolina, and it looks like garbage, right? It's covered in surface rust, and I was like, I can almost afford that. I wonder if I'll trade for a T-bucket. And I remember, my dad's like, do not trade that T-bucket for that rusty Mercury. That rusty Mercury is going to be, you've got a finished car. Just drive it and enjoy it. It's awesome. And I was like, but it's a 49 Merc. I gotta have it. So I borrow my buddy's rollback, put the T-bucket on it, cry the whole way to South Carolina. Get there, the guy's like, this is awesome. I'll trade you. And he had pulled it out of a garage, but Charleston, South Carolina is a coastal town, and it was just covered in surface rust, right? But I start looking at it, and didn't have any real major cancer. It was just, didn't look good, right? So I'm like, all right, well, let's do it. I get it back, and the first thing I do is just spend a week or two just sanding. I tried everything that removes rust that you can think of, Scotch-Brite and navel jelly and a must for rust and all this other stuff, but I got it in bare metal, and I'm like, all right. So I painted it in flat white primer. It was unchopped, had a small block Ford in it, and an automatic. And I started driving. It was my daily driver. All I drove for years was old stuff. It always broke. And so I'd have a bicycle in the back, because when I was working at the shop that I was at, couldn't be late. If you weren't 15 minutes early, you were late. I'd blow it up, I'd break it, I'd lose brakes, I'd trash a transmission, lose forward gear, whatever, I'd pull off into a ditch, sprint around to the back of the car, and I'd get on my little BMX bike, and I'd haul ass to work on the back on a bicycle. I would just book it, 7-8 miles, whatever it took, I'd get there. My father worked at the same Ford dealership from 1964 until 2016 when he retired. The same dealership, the same job. You cut the man, he bleeds Ford blue, but never really a custom guy. So I think that when I started getting into customs and hot rods, he liked it, but it wasn't anything that he really knew an awful lot about. But when it came to the engines and it came to making them walk and talk and run and drive, he was the king. I hated the fact that it had a small block Ford in it because it was from 1964, and I really wanted an earlier engine. So I was like, what would make a Mercury cool? Flatheads are slow. What could I run? And I was like, well, here Merc ran a 52 Cadillac. And I was like, I'm going to do that. So then I start looking at, well, what can I do for what can I do for a transmission that's going to withstand the abuse that I plan on giving this thing? I was like, it's got to be a LaSalle, right? You know, you can't break a LaSalle. That's what they drag raced behind, you know, blown Emmys in the 50s. So I had the car how I wanted it. My father, he first came down to visit, and we fired it up, and just by hearing it run, he said, shut it off. I had too much piston to wall clearance on the pistons, and it was knocking and all this, and so we pulled it back out and went through it again, and I had to find another block, and you know, my dad helped me get all the valve timing and everything sorted out and showed me the quick way to do that. And I hustled to get it in paint because I said, Dad, drive to North Carolina in 2 weeks, we're driving to New Jersey. And he said, what do you mean? I said, we're going to take my Mercury and we're going to drive to Wildwood, New Jersey. And he said, awesome. So he drove 500 miles down, day of, helped me change the oil in the Merc and grease the front bearings and do a nut and bolt on the suspension and everything. And then we loaded up, and all of us took off and hauled ass to Wildwood, New Jersey. And he, you know, every time that I talked to him, he'd bring up that show and how much fun that was. And, you know, we had had big plans to do something like that again, but, you know, life has a tendency of getting in the way. And, you know, it just was something that I wish that we would have. Right now where the Merc sits is, you know, in this state of in between. Like, I really want to finish the car to what my level is now. At this point, I want to bring it back in the shop, blow it apart completely, and redo all the gaps, rebuild all the hinges, and make everything just open and close perfect, you know, because it has settled over the years. And there's some things on the car that I won't touch. I won't do anything different on the roof because, you know, I had some really good friends helping me on that. I learned an awful lot on that. You know, it took everything I had at the time to get it to that level, and I'm good with that. The part of me that built that car so many years ago, it's still there. The part of me that finishes the car is just going to finish it at a higher level. It's never going to be done, but the soul is in, you know, the hand-built aspect. Every panel on that car has been touched. Looking at it, and the way that every time I walk into my garage underneath the house and I walk past that car, I look at it, and I fall in love with it every time I drive it, every time I look at it, and some of the imperfections are what I love. If I won the lottery tomorrow, there would be signs, but really there would just be noise. I would be out here and my neighbors would love me because I would run that hammer from 7 in the morning until midnight.